welcome to the Trews. There's been an election, hasn't there? Now, before the election, people like David Cameron. Do people like David Cameron? No one likes David Cameron. But David Cameron was making a lot of electoral pledges. Since then, they've been returned to power. Now what's actually happening? Let's have a look at before and after the election.
We need to make another 30 billion of savings. That's the one in £100. So 5 billion of that should come from the tax evaders and the aggressive tax avoiders. We've gone after them every year in government. We'll continue to do that. We then need to go on making savings in government departments through efficiencies, and then the welfare savings that I've talked about. That's my plan.
So as we just saw, prior to the election, the Conservatives pledged that they would get 5 billion by clamping down on tax avoidance. Oh, we'll clamp right down. But let's see if the Queen talks about tax avoidance.
Close the door.
I mean, it's all so weird. This is, so on one hand, we've got this modern world of Silk Road and cybercrime, and on the other hand, close the door. Sergeant Gubbins, welcome Her Majesty. And then Greg Stickleback arrives and elbows open the door with his ivory pin. I mean, like, why are these particular things? So it shows you that pageantry and tradition are used as a veil to kind of guard privilege and nonsense. I love a bit of tradition. I love a bit of mythology. I think we should all have rituals that tie us together as a community, but rituals that enforce inequality should be looked at. I mean, what the hell is going on?
The Queen commands this Honourable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
Like, we're supposed to just accept this, are we? That this sort of weird, bejewelled, mad fella with a pair of clown's gloves as a necklace on comes, the Honourable House. Like, none of us think of politicians as honourable. We know some of them are paedophiles. We know they all fiddle their expenses. We know they're all on the take. It don't matter what kind of toy town mayor you get in there with a big daft stick to tell you they're honourable. It just doesn't wash. That's why people believe in the Illuminati shit, because of this sort of stuff going on. What possible provenance can there be for this madness? Oh, and it just turns into Lakeside. We've got to get out the bloody door.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government will legislate in the interests of everyone in our country.
What about poor people? I do sometimes want to go to the Queen. What is the thing that you've got in your head that makes it all right for this to happen? Because it must be that you think that poor people are scum. Is it that? Because otherwise, how do you justify that mad, expensive hat? I'm afraid there is no money available for nothing. What's that thing on your head? The thing on your head made out of precious diamonds. I couldn't possibly do this job without my shiny, fucking expensive hat.
Helping working people get on, supporting aspiration, giving new opportunities to the most disadvantaged.
I mean, the fucking nerve. You could just take your hat off and go like that and build an hospital. I mean, that necklace, that's worth a couple of schools. I mean, like, people say that there's a value in having a monarchy. We've established that there isn't from a tourism perspective. From a spiritual perspective, all right, perhaps the idea of some focus of nationhood would be useful, but what does that nation stand for? It's a nation that stands for inequality, deception, and lying. So that's what our monarch is. Whether or not David Icke's right about them being reptiles and lizards, who cares? What they are, visibly, is a symbol of inequality and privilege and antiquity, values that have no place in the modern world.
My government will continue with its long-term plan to provide economic stability and security at every stage of life.
Every stage? Well, that means it's constantly going to happen. Born, there's some security there. Childhood, some security there. Getting old, some security there. There's none, is there? We all know that this is a total farce. People like the Queen, like my grandparents, God rest their souls, if they heard me talking about the Queen like this, they'd be, oh no, Russell, no, she's lovely, the Queen. Like, and I've had that crap put in me. We can't help it. Every time we look at a pound note or a bloody stamp, there she is. You know, but the fact is that this is a great big gold-smothered lot of bollocks. Look at the reality. The bank bailout cost the UK public, that's you, $850 billion. The UK has lost £850 billion to tax evasion since the crash. So you see, instead of taking 850 billion quid off of you, they could have took 850 billion quid off of people that are evading tax. They're not going to do that. She doesn't mention it. It's not an issue. It's not relevant to them. What the function of this pageantry, this bejeweled madness is to sustain and preserve itself and to maintain the dominant order, which requires you to be poor and ignorant. So that is what you will remain. This was very reasonably priced.
They will continue the work of bringing the public finances under control and reducing the deficit.
George fucking Osborne wants to do some work on his face, doesn't he? I mean, there's that famous bit of footage of him looking like he's literally off his nut on coke in Parliament.
And I'm sure he...
Now look at him on this day. Hello, George, try not to look like you're actually evilly sneering. He might well be sneering and laughing because Osborne had to admit that he's had a family trust offshore worth 4.5 million. But he's the Chancellor! You're in charge of being a Chancellor. What's that? Oh, you know, anything to do with money and that. Good, all right. You ain't got nothing shady going on offshore. Some shady things, yeah. Well, all right, you're the Prime Minister. Did you, in fact, get your inheritance from this offshore scheme? I did a bit do that, yes. Well, perhaps you shouldn't be in fucking charge then.
And reducing the deficit, so Britain lives within its means.
We've got to live within our means. For example, the very idea that you'd be smothered in jewels and travel around in a golden carriage at a time where people are starving on the street seems like a sustainable lifestyle.
My government will bring forward legislation to reform trade unions.
Yeah, I mean, it's these trade unions. That's the problem. Working people coming together to have rights is a pain in the arse.
With legislation encouraging employment by capping benefits.
Encouraging employment by letting you starve to fucking death if you don't get a job. Things are bad, but they're going to get worse. The squeeze on benefits that Her Majesty has just mentioned will push 200,000 more children into poverty. Government stats show that rough sleeping in England has increased by 55% in the last 5 years, while the number of bed spaces in homeless accommodation centres fell by 7,000.
New legislation will modernise the law on communications data and ban the new generation of psychoactive drugs.
So don't ban psychoactive drugs. That's the only chance we've got of a bit of peace and quiet. Like, this whole thing looks like it's been conjured up as a consequence of psychoactive drugs. We've got to ban psychoactive drugs so we can have more ceremonies where billionaire pensioners can smother themselves in gold in front of a bunch of judges and posh tax avoiders and tell poor people to fuck off. Psychoactive drugs is the problem. Really, what we've learned is it's going to get a lot worse if you're poor. If you're rich, like the people stood in there, like the rich person talking now and the rich people that do the admin for her, things are going to basically be okay. But we had an election. This is what we voted for. It wouldn't have been a lot better with a Labour government. Moderately better. Barely relevant, but, you know, a tiny bit better. So real change has got to come from us. If you want change, you better get organised because no one else is going to do it for you. Your Queen ain't going to do it for you. Your government ain't going to do it for you. The only hope you have is yourselves. And if you're on your own, yeah, then you're extremely fucked. That's some true news. Subscribe here.
Nose is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the nose. If the nose was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.